Ever wondered what it would be like to explore all 7 continents with your family? Imagine the stories you'd tell, the bonds you'd forge, the memories you'd create. Today's guest did exactly that, and she's here to show you how you can do it too without breaking the bank. But first, a word from our first ever partner. This episode is brought to you by Safety Wing, offering nomad insurance tailored for adventurous families like yours and mine. Because when you're chasing your dreams across the globe, peace of mind is your most valuable travel companion.
We just want to travel the world, the world, the world, travel the world.
Now, buckle up for an inspiring journey with Susie Chau, a travel expert who turned a year-long family sabbatical into a life-changing odyssey from Antarctica's icy landscapes to Africa's sun-baked savannas. Susie discovered the secret to deepening family connections through intentional travel. But here's the kicker. She's not keeping those secrets to herself. In this episode, Susie will reveal how you can craft unforgettable, budget-friendly adventures that will transform your family life, whether you're dreaming of a weekend getaway or a round-the-world expedition. You're about to discover how to make it a reality. So, are you ready to turn your travel dreams into treasured family moments? Let's dive in with Susie Chau on Our Offbeat Life. Hello, Susie.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, how are you today?
I'm doing excellent. I am joining you from Denver. So happy to be in a nice, warm, cozy house.
Nice. Yes, we're on the same time zone. It's unusual that I'm on the same time zone as a guest. Uh, Here in Mexico, they got rid of daylight savings time a few years ago, and so right now we happen to be on the same time zone as Denver.
Oh, very nice.
So I know I gave a little bit of intro there, but can you tell everybody a little bit about who you are or what you do?
Yes, absolutely. So I really specialize in helping families, which is why this podcast, I think, is such a perfect fit. I'm excited to share my knowledge with your audience, specifically around how you can take a trip and use travel as a tool for filling your soul, as you mentioned, and really being intentional with how we travel to bring more meaning into our lives. So it's really looking at travel more holistically than just a trip. And obviously, for anyone listening that's either currently traveling long term or interested in doing that, that integration of travel with life is something that is so unique. And, based on my experience, as you mentioned, I took a year-long sabbatical with my husband. We traveled all 7 continents, and that was truly a life-changing experience for me. And after returning home from that, I knew that I needed to share my knowledge with other people so that even those taking just regular vacations can elevate those experiences and get a real ROI on that. So, people spend thousands of dollars on vacations and they try to squeeze as much as possible in. And I totally get that, especially for any Americans listening. We have very limited vacation time. So that's the thinking and how we maximize the value out of that time and money. But really, I think that slowing down and being present and being very mindful about how you travel, that's really where you get the meaning. And you mentioned, strengthening bonds. That's the real gold in travel, is not necessarily, seeing and doing things, checking things off your bucket list. That's all great. But the growth and the connections, those are the things that really make you feel alive and set that spark in you. And if you think about your favorite travel memories, they're usually not specifically about, seeing and doing that thing that you dreamed about. And yes, maybe some of those are, but a lot of times it's just the spontaneous or serendipitous thing that happened, that was completely unplanned. But really, I help people design a trip to leave space for that and, overall just be mindful and intentional with their travel choices.
I love that. And I love that you mentioned that it's the gold in the travel, that's really a very cool statement in my opinion, the little things that are around the trip, not necessarily seeing that mountain, but all the things that led up to it and being with your family at that time, it really is it's wealthy in my opinion,
100%. And yes, that's a good connection. That is true wealth. And everybody knows, experiences make you feel wealthier than just the thing. But so often we just focus so much on, where you're going, what you're doing. And those are the exciting things, when you're sitting at home, especially you dream about going and seeing the places and doing the things. But when you're actually there, the real gold is who you're with, what you're feeling, and how that can change who you are, who you're being, and, ultimately give you that personal growth or growth, together as a family specifically.
Yeah, I was just talking to somebody earlier today, and I told them that this lifestyle, no, I'm not rich. I don't afford this because I'm rich, but it does enrich me. There's so much you can do, and it doesn't. You can have a small budget and still just get that enrichment, that gold, as you mentioned.
Yeah, and I believe that to my core. Travel does not have to be expensive, and I'm sure we'll probably get into, budgeting and things like that, but certainly when I came back home after taking my sabbatical, my year-long sabbatical, and I've taken some other shorter ones that are more, 4 or 5 weeks, everybody assumed that, especially going to all 7 continents, that's a huge amount of money. I mean, like, they probably had no concept of how much it was, but when I told them that we spent less in that year traveling to all 7 continents, and we traveled fast, which is not necessarily what I recommend today, but we were in our 30s, we were young and had the energy, but all of that cost less than just living. We were living in Chicago at the time. Again, not a super extravagant lifestyle, but 1 year traveling the world costs less than just a year living in Chicago being normal. So that I think puts things into perspective and is a really important point, especially for the people listening that may love this idea, but not see how that's possible for them. And I think that when you really break it down, it doesn't have to be that expensive, and it is much more attainable than most people think.
That's cool. All right. Well, let's get to know you a little bit better. I like to do a little lightning round here. So, all
I'm ready. Let's go.
right. Coffee, tea, soda, water. What's your beverage?
Coffee all the way. I got some right here. It's afternoon. I'm sipping on my coffee.
All right. Pet of choice, dog, cat, or something unique?
I had a cat growing up, so I probably would say cat. We don't have any pets right now, and that's by choice. It makes travel a lot more difficult if you've got
Good.
I know you can travel with them, but I am pet free by choice.
Oh, okay. Uh, Pool or beach?
Beach.
City or country?
Oh, this is hard. When I travel, country, because I live in a city, so I want to be more in nature when I travel, and somewhere between country and like a small town. That's I think the gem.
All right. Now, would you rather be able to understand and speak every language in the world or be able to teleport anywhere at any time?
Teleport all the way.
If you get rid of that little travel destination time.
Exactly. Just jump straight there, on the beach, for example.
Nice. Okay. And then imagine this. Get off the plane at your next destination and you arrive into the zombie apocalypse. You're able to get to your bags. What's the first thing you grab and why?
Ooh, I don't know if I would have anything long or heavy to fight the zombies, but some sort of weapon, I think, to keep myself safe.
All right. All right. So tell us a little bit about that first sabbatical. What inspired you to take that first long sabbatical and travel to all seven continents?
Yeah, and traveling all 7 continents was not the original goal, but it sort of evolved that way, but the real catalyst for that experience was my husband actually lost his job due to an acquisition of the company he was working for, so it was a bit of turning lemons into lemonade, and it took some time to convince him, so I can definitely address, if you are listening right now and dreaming of this and you know that your partner is very much not on board, it's a process. So be patient. And it was one of those things where I felt like there was a sabbatical seed in the back of my brain from as early as I really didn't start traveling internationally until I studied abroad in college. But during that experience and, other travels in my 20s, I would stay at hostels and the normal conversation is, where are you from? How long are you traveling? And I would talk to all of these people who were traveling for months or years. And I had never thought that people did this. Growing up, I grew up in the Midwest in Cleveland, Ohio. And, this was just so far outside of what was, normal to me. And especially as I, went into my career, I was in management consulting for about 13 years and I had this identity as a, corporate person and I have a very important job and things like that. And that lifestyle didn't it really had some tension with the whole idea of traveling long term. I thought, "Oh, well, I couldn't do that." That's for, some people who are much, less settled down, I suppose. I mean, I was in my 20s, so it's kind of funny to think about now. But that seed was planted in the back of my brain, I mean, years before that, and something in me, it was just immediate once he found out that he was going to be laid off, and thankfully, we had a pretty long window to prepare before he, like, really was out of a job. So there was, that was an advantage in our situation. So we kind of just, like, worked the problem and figured out, theoretically, how could this work? And we worked with our financial advisor to, see, like, how could this financially fit into the big picture of our especially our long-term goals. So that was a conversation, and we really just tried to figure out, it was like one solving one problem at a time, essentially. And, we were able to get clarity and I was able to get a leave of absence from my job, which was a huge advantage because we knew we had at least one income to return to. And our original thought was we would travel for a year or so, but I think the comfort was worst case scenario, we can come back at any time if we're really not loving it and, mentally kind of preparing in that way. Of course, we didn't. We extended it a little bit extra, but it was such a phenomenal time. And as I mentioned with the 7 continent idea, that kind of evolved naturally because we were just planning on doing Asia, coming home for Christmas, and then going south and doing South America and then ending in Europe. But when we were in Asia, we found a cheap flight to Australia where we have some friends and family. And once we had Australia, then when we came home, we were back in the US after the holidays and plotting our next steps. And we were like, you know what? Let's just go to Antarctica. That is the thing that we're most excited about. And we have the amazing blessing of time. And to go to Antarctica, you need some time. I mean, that is a trip that I mean, minimum 2 weeks, definitely more, especially if you want to go to, South Georgia and things like that. So we were able to, go down. We went down to Ushuaia and got a last minute spot on a boat to Antarctica. And once we had Antarctica, we were like, let's just go for 7. So we did a bit of North Africa too, from Europe. So it kind of happened organically, but we, specifically left our itinerary a bit unplanned and we were able to go with the flow and see how we feel, which, especially for a trip that length, I think is good. I might have some different advice depending on individual situations, but certainly when thinking about family travel, I know most people listening do have a family. I would definitely recommend slower. There's a lot more people to move, but also other considerations, that would factor into how you might approach a trip like that as a family.
Yeah, there's so many families out there trying to figure out what they want to do, and a 1 year for 7 continents is a lot, especially depending on the age group of the kids.
Yeah.
Our plan has been 7 continents that are Christmases. So
Ooh, I like that.
yes, so we're a little over halfway done. So that's awesome.
Amazing.
We did Antarctica this last one, which was awesome.
So cool. I mean, it's my favorite place in the world.
Yeah.
Truly.
Each each continent, I mean, there's so many different subcultures throughout the continents, but they've all changed me in different ways. I pulled different things out of every single one of them. Which continent, like, would you say really struck you or pulled those heartstrings of yours?
Aside from Antarctica, because that was the one that really it feels just otherworldly because it's so remote and it's just you and nature and, yes, the people that you're on the boat with. But you just feel so small in comparison to everything that's surrounding you. So that really pulled my heartstrings, but aside from Antarctica, I would say my heart is in Europe. Every time I go, I feel more at home, and we just got back from a trip to France. I have a 3-year-old. I probably should have mentioned that in my intro, which is one reason why I'm so passionate about helping families because I understand how much more complex it is to plan a family trip versus, a solo trip or a trip as a couple. But that trip really being able to share, that was the first trip that I've taken my son to Europe and we just had a ball. It was just fully exceeded expectations. And that's a place that I just really I love the vibe and the culture and the values there. And it feels homey to me.
Well, let's expand upon that for a second too, because you did mention your 3 years now, 3-year-old. So
Mhm.
you've been a traveler before kids, with a different lifestyle that way, and again
Mhm.
with a kid, which is it changes things up. It really does.
Yes.
Um, so for those that are out there that maybe are in a similar situation, how did having a child and still continuing to have your travel lifestyle, how did that whole thing fit in with your life, or how did you transition into that?
Yeah, I think it was always part of the plan to travel as a family. Unfortunately, I had a COVID baby. My son was born in 2020, so we had dreams of traveling a lot more when he was a baby than we were able to do, but now I think he's almost 4 and this is just such an amazing age that he's fully engaged when we travel and just being able for him to communicate with us and show him for him to show us the connections that he's making and what he's learning and he's even talking about tons of stuff that he learned now that we're back home that makes it and it's super cheesy to say but it made it so much more meaningful to have those experiences with I mean, we went to Paris, which I had been to, fortunate enough to have even lived there for a period of time. So it's a special place to me, And, for me to see it through his eyes in a totally new way, I mean, that really made me feel alive. And I want to share that perspective with people because what most people talk about is traveling with kids, it's so hard and, oh, the jet lag and, just talking about all of the negative things. And yes, I mean, we all struggle with jet lag. I mean, even us as adults, so I don't expect my 3-year-old to land in Paris and, immediately be on European time. But I think that it's really the mindset that you approach travel with. It doesn't have to just be I don't know if you've seen any of these kind of memes or reels or things going around like vacation is just parenting in another location. And I mean, there's definitely some truth to that. You still have to parent even in that other location. But if you really change what you're focusing on instead of you know, up in the middle of the night because of jet lag, if you, can just be patient with that, but really focus on what they're experiencing, how they're growing, how they're changing, that can instantly just make the whole trip more meaningful. And that brings a different perspective than any other trip that I've taken before kids. So in a way, it really adds value because you get to share it with somebody who's doing all of this for the first time, which is just so special.
It is special. I mean, there's so many firsts, and you're experiencing a lot of firsts at the same time as they're experiencing the first as well. So
Mhm.
yeah, that's pretty cool. Well, so you started all this. You got a leave of absence from work. How did you transition from knowing that okay, I need this job that I have that I'm going back to entrepreneurship, to starting your own business, helping other travelers travel long term?
Mhm. Yeah, so after my year-long sabbatical, I went back to management consulting and I started my travel business as a side hustle. So I was still working full-time, and I think that something that I would definitely recommend to people to just start experimenting. You don't have to quit your job immediately and go all in because there is a huge learning curve for starting anything, but certainly starting a business. And so I think by still having the full-time income, it took the pressure off, right? I didn't have to be, earning money and being super successful right away. Especially a travel business, it takes some time to build up clientele and also, earn money. So I really started my business by being more of a traditional travel advisor where I was planning trips for people. And, a part of that compensation was commission that don't hit until way after they travel. So you could be working on something and not see that money for, over a year, for example. But anyway, so I eased into the business by going from, a side hustle, and then I negotiated working part-time for a period of time with my consulting job as well as my business, and then I moved to full-time. So it was a gradual process, and I think that that's something that I would definitely recommend because it's definitely sexy to say, "Oh, quit it all and start your own thing, go for it." You can see that all over the internet, right? But in reality, there are other ways and other approaches to starting something if you have an entrepreneurial itch or a great business idea that is just tugging at you to start, like, just start. It doesn't have to be a full-time thing right away.
Yeah, that makes me think of, you see it all the time. The Instagram videos that show this is the Instagram photo, this is the reality, and you see the
100%.
crowd, and you see that same thing going for a business. If there is a reality to it, we all travelers have to make money somehow, and it's not
Mhm.
always sunshine and rainbows. It's just like any
No.
other job. You have your stressful moment.
Yeah.
So how do you balance the excitement of seeing something cool and doing the traveling with the realities of running a business at the same time?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question, and I think it's wonderful to work in the travel industry because it is kind of the sexy, cool job where you can show people the world and what you are learning about it. And, I think that it really comes down to integration of 2 things. So, for example, my last trip to France, it was so fun. I'm active on Instagram and I like to share stories and people were just loving them. I mean, I think ultimately people love to see people having fun and, experiencing true joy, which I was genuinely feeling at the time. And people can feel that even through, a phone, a computer screen, but now I'm in the period of really launching something new. I'm sure we can talk about that in a bit, but that's where I can combine some of the things that I'm learning. And as I'm launching it, I can share recent stories from my trip to be like, this is how it played out in my experience. And also, of course, share other client stories as well. But, people like hearing stories and travel. There's no shortage of stories that you can tell. And I think that it's important to really develop, from a business side of things, develop tools and resources and support that can help people with, real problems that they're having because of course travel is fun, but it also can be very stressful. There's a lot of questions and a lot of decisions and that's what I'm here for is to make that whole process a lot easier.
Very good. And it sounds like your clients have full use of you when they're doing their travel preparation. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and I think that that is something that is so needed because so many questions pop up throughout the process. I mean, not only in where should I stay, what should I do, but also, especially as you get closer to the trip and when you are about to depart, of course, that's when you have all of the questions like,
Yeah.
"Oh, what should I pack?" And, all these things, but I've hopefully, I have answered the questions for them before they even know to ask them. That's my goal, but, there's always something that pops up.
Always something. Yes. All right. Now let's talk about world schooling a little bit here. I know your son is still quite young, but from your experience, how can families incorporate education and learning into their travel plan?
I think that travel is the best educator, and it happens naturally, outside of a formal lesson plan, and certainly you can incorporate that into your travels as well, especially if you're traveling long term. That's something that is, very useful, especially depending on the age of your kids. But I think that leveraging the natural things that kids are experiencing on the road and really using those as teachable moments, that's where things stick. And you can infuse real world skills, which are usually not taught in the classroom, but I would argue maybe even more important than a lot of things that, you would read in a book. But one of the things that I love to talk with families about, especially if their kids are in school, is how can you align your trip with either things that they're super interested in, your kids, or things that they're learning about. If, for example, they're learning about, world history and you want to plan a trip to Rome and, you can see the Colosseum and those types of things. That's what's really going to feel that knowledge in their brains so much richer than it would just kind of, hearing about the stories in a book. So I think that there's ways that travel can be, such a useful asset. Now, the clients that I usually work with are either, they've got younger kids, so school isn't necessarily a factor. I do a lot of work with people who are taking sabbaticals that are maybe like a month or 2, and a lot of times they line that up in the summer, during school breaks, so they don't have to worry so much about keeping up curriculums and things like that. So I'm certainly not a homeschool expert by any means, but one of the things in my research to help families find options on is there is a plethora of ways to educate your kids while they are traveling outside of, most people just assume, okay, well, if I want to do this, I have to be the teacher, I have to be the homeschooler, I have to follow this, plan. But there's other options. And especially now more than ever with the introduction, especially post COVID, of online tutoring, and that could be one on one or, a more formal or larger group program. So there's different schools and academies that offer this that I think take the pressure off the shoulders of the parents, especially the ones who, maybe they're both working full time and they're like, I want to do this and I have a remote job so I can work remotely. But what do I do about school? I don't want to, or I can't, from a time perspective, be the teacher. But the other thing that, especially for anybody listening that is in the boat just kind of considering this, one thing that I just want to highlight is that the education on the road, does not equal the same amount of time as the classroom. So 8 hours, or 6, 7 hours in the classroom translates to like a couple hours, when you're on the road. So it's very much not apples to apples. And I just wanted to plant that seed
Yeah.
because I think that's really important for people to understand and also, conceptualize how they would make this work, especially if they are going to be working while traveling long term.
Yeah, you make some really good points. I mean, school, I mean, they're teaching 30 children, and so of course it's going to take longer to get through it than a one-on-one education. And like homework, not really a thing. Homework is just more work. It's just more education. Instead of the homework, instead of calling it homework, you can just give the stuff that would be homework, and students can practice that, or your children can practice that stuff. That's sometimes what we do. A worksheet comes in really handy. I'm not a fan of homework in the real in regular schooling even. It's just busy work to for a child. There are some cases that are different where other kids might need that extra reinforcement, but on the vast majority, I feel homework is just busy work. Whereas in the homeschooling and in the travel schooling type of world that we're in, it just becomes something that I can use to help further an idea, such as comes to my mind when we went to Machu Picchu. We weren't expecting to do anything other than just learn from what was around us. But our guide, he brought with her a little satchel, a pen, and a little booklet of papers that she printed out, which was basically a sneak and find, so our son could find things that he bought the llama. All right, I found the llama, checked off. Find this sculpture, this statue. Already found it. All these little things on it and much, much more. Even had space for him to write. He wanted to add extra thoughts that he sees from there. And you could tell she had an education background. And she brought that to the work, and it enhanced the experience more so than just learning from the environment that we were planning on doing. It just had that extra add-on on top of it. These are the types of things that we've learned now that you can do as a world schooling family. You don't have to wait for the guide to do it. You can bring these types of things along with yours as well. So it's really cool.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think just keeping an open mind in what education needs to be and is, and every parent is going to have, I think, a different viewpoint or requirements for what they want for their children. So I think getting clear on that and then finding a solution that aligns with that is really important because there's a huge spectrum, for anywhere from like unschooling to really, keeping a curriculum that is aligned with their homeschool, like, or their school back at home, there's everything in between. So it's finding that ground that you're comfortable with as a parent. And that also aligns with your children's goals too and what they're interested in. I
Yeah.
think that the more you can foster whatever their specific interests are, that's where like the real magic of infusing the environment that you're in while you travel with that interest, that's when things click and connect and, possibilities are endless from there.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, sometimes my son and I will just sit there, we're watching TikTok together or whatever, and he sees something cool somebody did, or like a cliff they jumped off of, or one time he saw a rainbow slide, and we were like, "Okay, where is this thing?" And we found out it was in El Salvador, and we were like, "Oh, well, we're in Guatemala now, so we're going through El Salvador in a few months. Let's find out what place it's at." We found out it's a restaurant, so we went there, and he got to experience it. He saw it online. It was something he was interested in. Yeah, it's not educational based, but it gave him a chance to do something that he was interested in while we were still traveling. Um,
Yeah. And the same thing with my son. So one of not the only reason, but one of the reasons why we went to France was because he's very into landmarks. He's got a world map puzzle, world map interactive thing, and his eyes lit up when he pushed the Eiffel Tower, and the map told him, "There's shops and restaurants." He goes, "Mom, there's shops and restaurants in the Eiffel Tower, and there's 20,000 lights." And that is still the highlight for him. He's very consistent. So he wanted to see the Eiffel Tower. I I had honestly never been up the Eiffel Tower. I've been there, probably spent like a collective couple months in Paris, never went up it. But with him it was magical, especially because we were there at dusk and we saw the light sparkle, and that was a highlight honestly for him, but also I think for me just watching him, and his eyes light up seeing that. It was fantastic. So anytime your kid's interested in something like that, that brings you so much joy to be like, "You know what? We can't do that. Let's go." And those are like core memories that I think your kids will absolutely remember.
oh, definitely, they definitely do, and yeah, and I'm sure he knows more than the other preschoolers about,
We he we got him to start Duolingo before the trip, so we've been taking French lessons, and he was talking about it, and he was like, "Oh, I'm gonna tell my friends." I was like, "I'm pretty sure none of your friends are doing Duolingo right now. Like, you're not even 4, but I love that for you, and, so you can kind of have, like, your own special thing to prepare for the trip, and that makes it even more special."
yeah, it gives you that family bonding time too, especially if you're both
Mhm.
doing the Duolingo together. He's like,
Yeah.
go off do your Duolingo with, assignment." No, that's not as fun as, "Let's sit down, let's learn a few things together on
Yeah.
Duolingo," and
Every
yeah,
day, he said, "Mom, can we do our French lesson?" I was like, "Yes, absolutely."
very cool. Alright, changing gears a little bit back to, like, to working, even though we don't love to work, but we work to live.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
How has your definition of work-life balance changed since starting your own personal business and evolving it as much as you have?
Yeah, and that's something that I'm honestly working on, considering I came from a management consulting background, very long hours, corporate environment that was so deeply ingrained in me. And to be honest, I think it started before that, just with our education system, kind of to bring things together, like what we really are priming our kids with, sitting in a classroom for, however many hours a day, very similar to sitting at a desk for however many hours a day. And, especially now transitioning into being my own boss, I have the freedom, that's why a lot of people start businesses is to have the freedom, but then I still find myself, working more 9 to 5 type hours, sometimes more. And, I think that it's a big shift of the mindset in terms of really taking advantage of that freedom. For example, traveling in France, just got back and, I did, I guess, work a little from a social media perspective. That is work for me. Honestly, travel is work for me, just experiencing things. So that's been a little kind of strange to wrap my head around. But, I think that what I am really trying to actively work on, especially now as a parent, is doing the things that are, that only I can do, that are the most value add, outsourcing some other things that are, not my zone of genius or just not frankly like worth my time to do, and really being able to rebalance the use of my time and use it in the most effective way. Now, very much a work in progress. I will not say that I am the expert, but it's something I'm certainly striving for.
Well, let's dive in on that a little bit there because a lot of people start business and they don't know when is the right time to start paying other people to do parts of it. When your time is valued more than this or that or the other thing. So can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, so I currently have a couple virtual assistants that are based in the Philippines. They're freelancers, and one of them has been with me since 2020. So I was kind of forced into outsourcing things in preparation for my maternity leave, which turned out to not really be needed because the world shut down, so nobody was traveling. So I didn't really have much of a business at that point when I actually had my son. But she's stuck with me and she's fantastic. And I think that, looking at some opportunities, in terms of a place to start, because I think some people may just assume that they need somebody that is, if they're in the US, they need to hire somebody in the US, and you certainly can. But if your budget doesn't allow, there's, other countries in the world, especially anybody listening to this understand, cost of living in different places in the world is drastically different. So by you working with somebody in a country like the Philippines, for example, their cost of living is lower. So you wouldn't have to pay them as much as somebody in the US with a higher cost of living, but you can still give them a phenomenal life and opportunity. And so like the VA that's been with me since 2020, she's also a mom. She just recently had another child. And, I know, especially after working with her for so long, what this job means to her and her family. So that's just something that you can consider is, working with some support from other countries. And I came from, because I was in management consulting, I had a global team. So I was very used to working, with all different time zones. And um, that wasn't necessarily a big leap for me, but there is a learning curve, if that is something that you're interested in. I think that you have to, just set expectations in terms and ease into it with baby steps. Again, by you hiring somebody, it doesn't need to be like a full-time job or even a full part-time job. There are people who do want supplemental income for just, a few hours a week, for example. There is somebody looking for exactly, what you need help with and is probably better at it than what you are. So I think just being open to those possibilities and starting small is probably the best advice I have for just getting started.
Excellent. Okay. Yeah, definitely keep your open mind. Working with people in other countries, you can definitely support them. They're able to get a good wage out of it for where they're living.
Mhm.
Versus like what you said, the US, where you have to pay more because it costs more to live.
Yeah. Yeah. So win-win.
So yeah, win-win. Except for the folks that won't work that are in the US,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah. But, also if you do feel that you want to work with somebody in the US, whether that's, based on, well, I guess time zone wise, there's plenty of people south, like Central and South America to consider. But if you do, just from a values perspective, want to work with somebody else in the US, that's where I think just, you know, for example, thinking about other parents who, maybe there's a stay at home, mom or dad that just wants to like use their brain, but can't necessarily do, a full-time job. Like they still do want to be a stay at home mom or dad, but just want a few hours a week. That's a place to start, so there's something for everybody. I think that it's just aligning what your budget is and being realistic with, how much you have to pay people and being very clear about what those jobs and roles are that you want filled.
Okay. Do you use something like Upwork or some other place to find these
The
workers?
First virtual assistant I found on a site called onlinejobs.ph. So that's specifically for Filipino workers. So all online virtual assistants, plenty of wide array of skills that are available. And yeah, it was a fantastic resource. And, still went through like the interview process. And I did, I guess, if we want to dive a little bit into just, real quick, what I did was a trial project that is paid just to kind of get a sense of like how well do we work together. And then I kind of eased into let's do a trial like couple weeks, again, paid like at the full amount. So you can ease into it. And if you find, this isn't working, then, there was not some huge long-term contract or anything that, you need to break. So I think
Gotcha.
that's a good I'm all about the little baby steps. As you can tell,
Yeah.
I feel like I've talked about that several times. It's just, easing into it. You don't have to go all in straight from the beginning. So just test it out, try it out and see if you like it. And, if you don't, that's okay.
Okay. Well, moving into like your standard clientele, what are some of the more common fears or concerns that they have about extended travel, and how do you normally address them?
Yeah, the common fears, especially for clients that are looking to travel for an extended period of time, one would be safety. You know, with travel, there's just a lot of unknowns, and especially adding kids into the mix, that just increases the complexity, increases the risk. And that's where I, usually address that concern, both kind of multifaceted. One is just insurance, travel insurance, medical insurance. We've got that at home. You can get that on the road to cover any unforeseen situations.
And speaking of travel insurance, let's take a quick break to hear about our partner who provides exactly that kind of peace of mind for travelers. Today's episode is brought to you by Safety Wing, your companion for international travel medical insurance, designed specifically for nomads just like us. Whether you're planning your next family adventure or already exploring new horizons, Safety Wing has got you covered with term and subscription pricing models that are some of the most competitive out there, starting from just a few dollars per day. With Safety Wings Nomad Insurance, I found what I believe is the best option for my travel needs in their Nomad Insurance product. But if you need something more robust, check out their newer Nomad Health, which is a fully equipped health insurance plan like you might already be used to. As someone who's traveled extensively, I can't stress enough how important it is to have reliable travel insurance. It's not just about medical emergencies. Safety Wing also covers things like trip interruption and lost luggage, which can be a lifesaver when you're on the road with your family. Check out the link in our show notes to learn more and get started. Now, let's get back to our conversation with Susie.
The other thing is just a more of a careful selection of the destinations that they choose. And that's where I like to think of myself as a bit of a destination matchmaker, because I've been so fortunate enough to travel to so many places. Once I get a sense of the client, what their interests are, what their priorities are, what their comfort zone is, I I feel like I can do a really good job at advising them to destinations and guiding them to destinations that either they already are considering, or maybe some destinations that they had never even thought about, but that they should consider. And that's, I think, where a bit of the magic happens, is some of those places where they're like, huh, I had no idea about XYZ country. That sounds awesome. And just kind of opens up a door for them. And, again, depending on their scenario. So some may want to go super slow. And in that case, visas may be a factor as well. So I've got kind of this like massive spreadsheet of either digital nomad visas or, other visas that can be made available depending on the, requirements and criteria that family has. So those are a few of the top concerns, you know, in terms of the traveling itself. But honestly, a lot of times, before they even like fully commit, and I'm definitely talking to probably a lot of people listening who are like, this sounds awesome. But, a lot of the fears, and I experience this myself too, is, what about, if they are thinking about quitting their job, when I return, I don't know about finding a new job. What will that look like? And to that question, I would say that, thinking about my husband, because he had to find a new, when he came to me and says, I'm losing my job, I was like, well, you can find a new job now or you can find a new job later. And it turns out that the year-long sabbatical was not the deterrent that, he was fearing. He was thinking, oh, people are going to see this gap in my resume. It's going to be so bad. What totally expected, and understandable,
That
but
was me.
really that set him apart from so many other people because it shows you can take risks. It
Mm.
shows that you value, your life and, the experiences, especially when he was going and interviewing with global companies to be like, well, I've traveled all around the world. I can work with other cultures. I can, deal with different languages. I have the soft skills to be able to work with other cultures. That is extremely valuable. And to be honest, most of his interviews were just, they ended up being really just questions about his sabbatical more than his skills. I mean, at a certain level, of course, like, yeah, your resume kind of paints the picture of like what you're capable of. So that set him apart from other candidates. And I think that it also polarized the other jobs that, if somebody, either wasn't interested because he took the sabbatical, then that's a good thing because clearly the values were not aligned.
I was
Um,
talking to somebody the other day who was very similar with their conversation, that it was actually the mother of an 18-year-old who lived in this lifestyle for basically his whole life.
mhm.
And his first job, all the interviewer would want to talk to him about was his travels. It's all on there, the world schooler kid resume, and not mostly his life experience stuff. And he got the job, but it was and got fast tracked in the programs in it. But it was all about his lifestyle. And wow, you've seen so much, you've been so much, you've interacted with so many people. You'd be great for this position because of this. It basically, the interviewer was selling themselves on that based on how cool of a lifestyle this is and what you must have to live through to go to do that. So I
Yeah.
understand.
Yeah, no, and I think I love that so much. I love that it was for an 18-year-old.
Yeah.
I mean, also thinking about college, applications and things like that. If a college administrator is looking at a whole bunch of applications and you have this like really unique experience, that is such a differentiator compared to, somebody who's just trying to pad their application with like a bunch of, school activities, and that's all good and everything. But ultimately, that deviation from kind of the name of your podcast off beeline, like it is a deviation from the beaten path. And that sets you apart in so many different ways. So yeah, from school and thinking about university to the workplace. People love hearing these stories because it takes courage to do something like this and to live this lifestyle. People probably think, "Oh, it was, so easy for you to go take a year-long sabbatical. You got a leave of absence. It's easy." But like, no, it was not easy. It's still, I had to make the decision. Well, we had to make the decision. I had to convince my husband to get him on board, but then all of those steps, they it's natural to second guess yourself and to be like, is this all worth it? And absolutely it's worth it. But it's hard. And that's why not everybody does it because it's hard and it, puts you outside of your comfort zone. You've got to, make some tough choices. But in the end, I think it's worth it.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely agree it's worth it. I wouldn't be living it for 5 years. But,
Yeah.
well, how do you help your clients budget for a month or more of travel? Are there, like, any, like, tips and tricks?
Yeah. Well, I think before even getting into the details, I think what I help people understand is if you are looking at, let's just take 1 month, because some people that I work with, they are interested in traveling long term, but they're not quite ready to commit to, selling it all and packing their life into a storage unit. I mean, that's a huge commitment. But what I tell them in that scenario is try it for a month, something longer than your typical vacation. And the beauty of traveling for even a month is that if you choose one location, you can experience what life on the road longer term can look like. And from a financial standpoint, you can get the advantages of long term rental discount. So, oftentimes if you're looking at home rentals, and especially for families, and you're traveling for, let's say, a month, if you stay in a place for a month or more, of course, you can get some pretty drastic discounts depending on the place. And again, because your average person who's just taking a vacation, they're not looking at a month-long rental, right? So they don't understand, or they didn't know that that savings is very much possible. And if you're also kind of doing more slow travel, at the end of the day, I would say on average, traveling in that way where you're staying in one place for a month, you can take day trips and stuff to explore. That is equivalent or sometimes even less than the average, week or two vacation, because you're not hopping around as much. You're not staying in more expensive hotels. And, so it's about changing your mindset on, what that costs. It doesn't cost, 4 weeks doesn't cost 4 times 1 week, from a budgeting perspective. So I think I'd like to start there, is that, it is very possible to take a month. Even, yes, you're probably not gonna, I mean, maybe you could rent out your existing home in that case, but most likely people won't for a month. So you're not really adding a crazy amount to your budget. I would just swap a 1 or 2 week vacation that you might be planning for like a month in that case. If your goal really is to do long-term travel and you just want to dip your toes in the waters, like see what that would look like for you, how, and see how you feel, that's a great way to start. But in terms of, especially the longer, people who want to travel for a year or more, I've got a calculator that work with clients on that estimates not only the travel cost, but also how you can finance it and fund it. And really just having some placeholders and also ideas for people to get creative with how they might fund this. It could be from existing investments, or selling some things, or, again, maybe renting out their home if they aren't, selling it, or there's a bunch of different ways that you can reallocate it, because at the end of the day, as I mentioned earlier, that our year-long trip was, less than just living in Chicago. That's because we were swapping costs. We were renting at the time, so we just ended our lease. So what we would usually spend on our rent money was just going towards accommodation. We did not have a car payments and those types of things that can go to flight. Then meals are meals. That all balances out, especially when you're traveling to all different countries. There are some more expensive countries, there are some less expensive countries. It all kind of evens out. But when you're talking about traveling for an extended period of time, it's really more about the swaps than like adding on expenses. And again, I think that's a bit of a mindset shift for people to wrap their heads around, like, how much would this cost? But assuming you're not paying for, accommodations, cars, and everything at home, it's just reallocating that same amount of money to things that are on the road.
It's a good way of putting it with the swaps and a reallocation. It does takes a little bit of a mindset shift, but when somebody does do this, if you want to dip your toes in, as you said, I agree to go for at least a month. 'Cause I tried something for 2 weeks and it was just really hard going back to work because you just got involved into this. You feel like you just got into this groove. And it just 2 weeks was not enough time for me to dip my toes the first time I tried anything long term. And it was just really difficult to return to my normal ether.
Yeah. Especially if your intention was to try it out. Like, there's each trip I think can have a different intention. So, that was different than just having a vacation because you wanted to kinda test some things out, but 2 weeks I think isn't I'm not shocked that you had a hard time readjusting back because it's like just once you get into the groove, then you're, back to reality.
Yeah.
That's where I think a month is a sweet spot of trying this lifestyle out, especially if you are planning on, working remotely or trying to figure out childcare, education. Like with a month, you can kind of work out some of those kinks and really give it a fair shot to see will this work and still be able to enjoy your time in whatever destination that you choose.
Yes. All right. So now, in what ways have your personal sabbaticals, all your trips, provided you with clarity about your personal and professional goals?
Yeah, I would say the year-long sabbatical was certainly the most impactful as you can imagine. That's what gave me the clarity and the confidence to start my business. I can tell you completely that I would not have started my business if I didn't take that first leap or risk of taking the sabbatical because what that proved to me in that whole experience was that I can do things that are outside of what I'm supposed to do, what society tells us, is the right way of doing life. And that showed me that not only can I do things differently, but I enjoy it a heck of a lot more because I'm doing things my way. And I had wanted to do something in the travel industry, really from the time I studied abroad, but I couldn't quite, figure out exactly what the right solution was or the right path was. But then once I came back, people were obviously asking me questions. I mean, even before our sabbatical, I was kind of well known to do a lot of traveling. So if you have any travel questions, talk to Susie. And so once I got back, though, that escalated even more. And I said, well, I should get paid for this. I've got a lot of knowledge and a genuine desire to help people because what I discovered was just a different way to approach travel outside of what people were generally doing with their vacations, which was much more of, I'm going to, take a vacation to escape from my reality. When I realized in that whole process that travel is a way to like elevate and improve your life if you approach it in that way. And so I wanted to infuse that, even for people who do just have, a week or two vacation a year, I want to make that the most impactful time for them to get that ROI on the time that they're spending, which is so precious, that vacation time when it's very limited, and also their money. If they're spending thousands of dollars on this, I want them to not only see and do some really amazing things, but also return back feeling, growth and connection and elevating their life.
Yeah, that's really cool. Elevate and grow your life that way. Expand on what you need and what you want. Get that ROI. I mean, those are all really important things. And I want people to know their services like what you offer are amazing for people to get started. My wife offers something similar, but you've been doing it so long. You've been able to help a lot of people with these itineraries and things like that. Once you get going and once you've got your feet wet, you can find your own paths, whether it's going to be more affordable or whether you're going to spend a lot and do the more expensive trips or places that you're going to visit. So you can start with something like what you have right here, Susie, because your itineraries are designed to help somebody with what their exact offering or what their wants are. Can you tell us a little bit about like how you come up with an itinerary for somebody?
Yeah, it's a bit of an iterative and collaborative process. So sometimes people will come to me with some specific ideas that they want, and other times they'll come to me with no clue, completely open book. Like they know generally the types of experiences they want, but they don't know where to do that, or, you know,
Susie, I wanna
or
travel. I wanna get away from my I wanna get away from my house. I wanna get away from my parents for a little while. What can I do? I need to take a sabbatical. Help me.
yeah, 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 yeah. And I welcome both of those situations. Honestly, I think it's even more fun for me if somebody comes completely blank page, like open, ready for anything, because either way, I start my process with exercise of really getting to their why, or their bigger purpose of why they want to travel, because that's what makes everything after that, the whole travel planning process, so much easier. And that's the step that I think most people skip because they jump right into, the really exciting part, which is where should I go and what should I do? That's very natural to jump there. But if you take a step back, slow down to speed up, as I say, if you really ground yourself into like, why do I want to take this trip, especially when it comes to a sabbatical or any kind of longer term adventure, that's even more important. And your why doesn't have to be this like huge, meaningful or spiritual, deep thing. But even just identifying a few goals that you have, whether that's accomplishment, I don't know, getting into a new hobby or revisiting an old hobby, something physical or mental connection. There's so many different ways. And I really guide my clients through this process. And I took a transformational travel design program this past winter. And what that did was unlock a step even before the why, which is like who I am. And so I've developed a process to make the discovery of the why so much easier, because some people really kind of stumble. They're like, I don't know why. I just want to travel. And yeah, like you were saying, I just want to get out of town. But there's always something underneath that, and that's one of my favorite parts, is digging underneath that to get at that, what's really going to make this trip meaningful, for this trip, and it can
Yeah.
change for any trip, but for this trip, like, what's going to bring you the most meaning and, a feeling of success or excitement at, when you return back. How does that what does that look like? And
So
that's what I use to then do the matchmaking and develop the itinerary and figure out the pacing and, all of those more logistical things that it just kind of falls into place, I think, once we get clear upfront on that larger purpose.
okay. So do you have a mindset trick challenge, that you do with folks, or that you could share with our listeners today that could get them started thinking about their goal, their purpose?
Yeah, and I think that with thinking about even just asking yourself, like, why do I want to take this trip? What do I want to get out of it? That's a win right there, because that's probably something that most people aren't even taking that step on. But I think that, to touch on a little bit more of like the who I am and that step that I just kind of recently unlocked with my recent certification that I did, that's more about like thinking about who you're being in life. And I have a little exercise, and you can even, start this, like, write down some post-it notes of the roles that you play, or descriptors, identity, like I'm a wife, a mom, a travel advisor, all those things, and put those in order of like your time and where you're spending your time versus like the actual priority that you want. And like, that's a very short version, but essentially it's showing you some of those gaps in who you are being that you might want to address. For example, if speaking to families, if mom, is you want it to be number one, and that connection with your kids is kind of waning a little bit, especially as your kids get older. That's very natural. But if you really want to improve those connections, strengthen those bonds, before they hit the preteen years, before they hit high school, teenage years, especially, that's where things really start to change. And so you can use this trip as a way to really solidify some of those foundational connections. And just by having that intentionality with how you want to do that, so that could be things like what are, your kids interested in? How can you use that to create these experiences that really connect you and you can continue on even after you return home? That's where the magic happens. And that's where like you can set that, as I said, set that foundation for really strengthening bonds that aren't just on the trip. Because it's great if you have these wonderful moments on the trip, but when you come home, that's where you want to really extend that, and that's where that ROI happens and the real meaning occurs. So,
I love it. That's really valuable information. I challenge everybody listening to play that part back again. Really take some notes because that was really valuable information that you normally won't hear right off the bat. Take that down, figure out where your time is and where you want your time to be. Give Susie a call afterwards and figure out exactly what your goals are. And maybe it works out. Maybe you get the best trip ever. Uh,
that's the goal. That's every trip, best trip ever.
every trip is the best trip
Keep
ever. Yes.
improving it. Yeah.
All right. Well, before we sum everything up today, do a little fun trivia.
All right. I'm ready.
All right,
Let's
we
go.
do some world trivia with travelers, and you've been to all 7 continents. Let's see what we can come up with here. All right, let's start out with what is the name of Guatemala's most famous ancient civilization?
Ooh. Guatemala is a place I have not been to.
Ooh,
Well, are you talking about like the Mayans?
I am.
Okay. My mind went, especially thinking about my son's world map. There's like a pyramid that's nearby, but okay, the Mayans. Whoo,
All right.
gonna make me hot here. I'm under the wire.
All right. So now let's go with what famous black and white bird lives in Antarctica?
The penguin.
A
My
penguin.
favorite.
All right. And all right, what is a famous animal that is known to only live in Australia that lays eggs but is not a bird?
Oh my, emu?
No, not an
No,
emu. Platypus.
platypus. Oh, that's a
I'd
good
also
one.
accept the echidna. I believe that's also down
I guess the emu is technically a bird, huh?
technically a bird. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Let's do all right, Asia. So, what is the capital of Malaysia?
Kuala Lumpur.
Yes.
Okay. I was like, is this a question or because don't ask me about other Malaysian cities.
No, it's okay. All right. And let's see here. We've got that was Central North America. That was Australia. We had Asia. We had Antarctica. So we have 2 more continents here. So let's go South America. What are the giant birds that look like ostriches called in South America?
Giant birds in South America that aren't ostriches. Oof. I I don't know this one.
They're called rayas. They look like ostriches. They're smaller, but yeah, raya.
Oh, I have not heard of them. Wow.
Ah,
Okay.
we saw them all over while we were driving.
Yeah.
All right, so we have 1 more continent, and let me see. Oh, Europe.
Europe.
All right, what is a famous tower that lights up with thousands of lights?
The Eiffel Tower. 20,000 to be exact.
20,000 lights. There you go.
It's
Excellent.
funny when we got to Australia, all I could think about the emu came to mind because my son's obsessed with the Wiggles, which are from Australia. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they have like this emu song, and so that's what popped into my head immediately. It's funny, I'm learning from my son's TV shows and also, like the world maps, things like that. So, yeah, that was fun. Didn't get them all, but,
That's okay. I
all
usually
good.
only do 5, but you've been to 7 countries, so
Yeah,
or
yeah,
continents, so
it
that's
was
fun.
worth the extra.
Alright, for final advice for sabbatical takers, what do you have for them? What are you offering? Talk to people about, like, what it is, the biggest lessons that you've learned and what you can help them.
Yeah, the biggest lessons is if you are thinking about taking a sabbatical but are on the fence, I would say that dream is in your heart for a reason and it's not going away. Trust me, I've talked to so many people who have told me, I've been thinking about this for years. Things like this don't just float away. They're there for a reason and you should listen to it and at least take some investigative steps and do a little bit of research and you don't have to bite off the whole thing all at once, but at least you give yourself the opportunity to see if this is something that would be interesting and or possible, I should say. And I guess to answer that question, if you're asking yourself that, it is possible. It's just a matter of figuring out the specific solution to the questions that you're asking or your potential roadblocks. And it's really just a matter of, when, especially if it's from a financial standpoint, like maybe it's not something that you can do tomorrow, but maybe in, a couple years, but it's something to strive for. And it's at least worth looking into to figure out how you can make that happen before just making excuses or assuming that that's completely out of the question for you. And so what I help people do that are in your shoes are answer those questions. And I think that probably the best source that I would suggest for you to start is I have a dream trip accelerator and that covers all of those questions. Like I said, we were talking about schooling. I've outlined all of the options for schooling, all of the options for what to do with your house, all of the options for, pretty much any question, and also how to convince your partner to get on board. So that's included as well. That would be a really good place to start. Of course, once you're ready to dive in and either test the waters with a month-long trip or even more, I have a service called Live Abroad for a Month. So that's a one-on-one service where I would really plan everything for you, help you prepare financially, personally, professionally, and even mentally for that trip. And then for those of you that are listening that well, really this is for anybody, but especially for those that are listening that are already on the road, live in this lifestyle, but really want to and resonate with what I was saying about making your experiences even more meaningful. I'm launching a new group program. That is a 5-week group program to help you plan your next adventure in a really meaningful way that strengthens bonds and really doesn't break the bank because as I also said earlier, I don't believe travel has to be expensive. And so not only am I giving you access to all of the tools and templates that I use with my one-on-one client, but also some helpful tips on using things like miles and points, because that's a really big strategy that can save you thousands and thousands of dollars that I really believe in to make those trips, those like really big dream trips accessible. So I think that that would be a really fantastic compliment for anybody who's already living that lifestyle, maybe who's got the travel planning down, but just wants to make improvement not only in the speed of which they plan their next destination for their trip, but also make it even more meaningful, especially for families. That's an area that I'm really passionate about because not only am I helping the parents, but I'm also really impacting the next generation. And, I really believe in raising responsible humans who look at travel as a way to connect with local communities, build them up, not extract, and really learn to be open-minded and globally minded citizens of the world. And that's something that, I think most parents want. And I think travel is just one of the best ways to achieve that.
So cool. Sounds like you have different levels for everyone from your dream trip analyzer to all the way up to your groups that you're rolling out here, which is amazing. So we'll have links to all of this in the show notes. So if you need it, just take a look down below and check the notes for everything that you need. But Susie, it was great talking to you today. What's next on your travel bucket list?
Well, next up, we are going to Belize for a 3-week program. And that is, oh, one thing that's included, I have a freebie. So anybody who wants to get inspired, I would love to share this. This actually perfect. I almost forgot. I would love to share this with you. It's called 99 Family Adventures Beyond Disney and All Inclusives to Raise Curious Explorers. And the program that I am going on in Belize is included in that because there are a few trips that include, like this one includes childcare. So it's
Oh,
specifically designed for digital nomad families. And I'm really excited about it because we'll be able to dip our toes into the sabbatical waters and digital nomad waters as a family, because that's something that, we would love to do. So this is a bit of a test, for myself. And I also can't wait to share that on social media and, really show people what's possible and help people think outside the mold of, what they can do with travel.
very, very cool. Well, again, yeah, we'll have links to all of that down below. Thank you so much for your time today. You've been an awesome guest.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
All right. Well, to everybody out there listening, I hope that you got as much out of this as I did. I love talking with Susie. She has so much to share. And if you need it to get in touch with her, definitely check the show notes. But until then, keep exploring and keep your mind open. Like it says behind me, you only live once. Just go.
Love that.
What an incredible journey we've been on today with Susie Chow. Her passion for travel and commitment to helping families create meaningful experiences truly embodies the spirit of intentional transformation. We've explored the profound impact that mindful travel can have on personal growth, family connections, and overall life enrichment. From budgeting tips to incorporating education into your adventures, Susie has equipped us with a wealth of knowledge to turn our travel dreams into reality. Remember, Susie's emphasis on clarifying your why. Understanding your deep motivations can guide you toward crafting an experience that truly resonates and leaves lasting impacts. And speaking of impact, let's not forget about the importance of feeling secure while exploring the world. This is where our amazing partner Safety Wing comes in. Just as Susie helps us plan transformative journeys, Safety Wing ensures we can embark on these adventures with peace of mind. Their Nomad insurance is designed specifically for families like ours who dream of extended travel and sabbaticals. Starting from just a few dollars a day, it's a small price to pay for the freedom to focus on creating those lifelong memories that Susie talked about, rather than worrying about the what ifs. And for those of you who need more comprehensive coverage, don't forget to check out their Nomad Health Plan. It's like having your home health insurance, but tailored for your globetrotting lifestyle. As Susie so eloquently put it, travel enrichment doesn't have to be expensive. It's about reallocating your resources and embracing intentionality. In the same vein, Safety Wing allows you to reallocate your peace of mind, freeing you up to embrace the transformative power of travel fully. Before you set off on your next adventure, be sure to visit the link in our show notes to learn more about Safety Wing's offerings. And while you're there, Don't forget to check out Susie's invaluable resources, including her Dream Trip Accelerator and upcoming group program on meaningful adventure planning. To our listeners, keep exploring, keep your minds open, and never stop seeking out those experiences that truly fill your souls. And remember, with the right planning and the right coverage, the world is yours to discover. Safe travels, everyone.
We just wanna see something bigger than us, to see and smell and taste something completely new. We just wanna travel the world.